Yes. Shout out to everybody joining the stream. Shout out to everybody joining the stream. All right, so let's get into it. Like today, I want to talk about one of the most damaging pieces of legislation for Black communities in the last 50 years, the 1994 crime bill signed by Bill Clinton. This bill supercharged mass incarceration with three strike laws, mandatory minimum sentences, and massive expansion of prisons and policing. It poured billions into locking people up, especially for nonviolent drug offenses, and helped create the school to prison pipeline. Mhm. Many argued it devastated Black families, removed hundreds of thousands of Black men from their communities, and created long term generational harm that we're still dealing with today. So, stick around as we break down exactly how this bill did so much damage.
True stories that will challenge everything you thought you knew.
So, where we're going to start is we're going to start it from the tippy top, because when you say to Black people, and this is brought up by a conversation that was just had on the Plug Drip Nation, and a Black man that said, "Oh, well, you're self-hating and you're a coon because you support Trump." What? Excuse me, how? Like at the end of the day, the 1994 crime bill had nothing to do with Trump. Well, you have to be a Republican. Could I be an independent? Could I look at political people based on their policies and vote with the policies that are actually in alignment with what's best for my financial future? No, because in the Black community, you have to be a Democrat. Otherwise, you hate yourself and you hate Black culture. So let's talk about this crime bill. And to anybody that catches this replay, don't be in my chat, don't be in my comments talking about well, Biden's not in office now. Because what a lot of people in the Black community don't understand is the after effects of legislature. So today I'm going to break it down for you, like you too. There it is. Let me get the whole thing, full screen layout. All right, let's go.
Bill, more courts, have more prosecutors. If we will commit ourselves to be as outraged about crime as the people who are victims are outraged, I believe we're going to begin to turn the tide, and I believe this bill is going to be an important part of it. I yield the floor.
Senator's time has expired. Senator from Delaware.
Madam President, I yield myself 3 minutes. Madam President, it's been a real pleasure to work with my friend from Texas. We most times are on opposite sides of issues. This time we're on the same side. But it is, I realize in this business, it's difficult for us to, notwithstanding the fact we're personally cooperating on this bill, for us to dismiss the prospect of some partisanship. Let me set the record straight on this bill. The underlying bill, which is now the Biden-Hatch bill, was the Biden bill. A guy named Biden wrote that bill, and he wrote that bill by going down and sitting down with the President of the United States of America, not with his Attorney General, not with anyone else, with Bill Clinton, President of the United States of America, who between the time he got elected in November until the time he was sworn in, called me at my home on 6 separate occasions. And he unfortunately doesn't need a lot of sleep. Sometimes literally, and I say this on the record, as late as 11:30 at night to discuss why I wasn't moving quicker on the Biden crime bill from before. I sat with him, not with his attorney general. He wanted 100,000 policemen. He does not view this as a social issue as opposed to trying to bring peace and security to the streets. As governor of the state of Arkansas, he presided over, as governor, the execution of individuals within the state and the death penalty. He supports the death penalty. He is the fellow who insisted that I bump this up from initially to when I said, where are we going to get the money? He said, well, all I know is I want 100,000 cops. I made that commitment. He had endorsed the Biden crime bill as a candidate when he ran. He is.
Now, I want you to understand, Joe Biden is a Democrat. Bill Clinton is a Democrat. So When Black people say that the Democratic Party has been the best benefactors to the African American community in the past 50 some odd years, or in the history of life, understand the foundation of this. Bill Clinton, Democrat. Joe Biden, Democrat.
The one who talks about the need for stiffer penalties. So notwithstanding the fact some of the old Democrats and former presidents who were Democrats before Carter, I suspect, I don't know who we're talking about here, but in the old days, it is true. When Richard Nixon was running for president, Richard Nixon used to talk about law and order, and the Democratic response was law and order with justice, whatever either one of those meant. I never knew. I was running then in 1972. I didn't think Richard Nixon knew what it meant, and I didn't think the opposition knew what it meant. This president is very, very straightforward and simple. He knows there are two basic steps here. One step is you must take back the streets. And you take back the streets by more cops, more prisons, more physical protection for the people. He also understands what my friend from Texas understands, and he doesn't talk a lot about, but he signed on to in this bill. He also understands there's a need to keep people who are first-time offenders, who are nonviolent offenders, or who are potential time offenders who haven't gotten, I yield myself an additional 3 minutes, who in fact are people who are getting themselves into the crime stream for the first time, that they should be diverted from the system. So I hope this crime bill, when it passes, the Biden-Hatch crime bill, as it becomes law, God willing, I hope that we will have ended once and for all this notion that is a hangover from the 60s, that somehow Democrats are weak on crime and Democratic presidents are weak on crime and Republicans are tough on crime. The truth is, every major crime bill since 1976 that's come out of this Congress, every minor crime bill has had the name of the Democratic senator from the state of Delaware, Joe Biden, on that bill, and has had a majority vote of the Democratic members of the United States Senate on the bill. So one of the things I want to do in addition to end the crime is end the political carnage that goes on when we talk about crime. Crime is not Democrat or Republican. Making the streets safe is not a Democratic or Republican issue. This is one of those issues I hope this passage of this bill will be taken out of the gridlock category and moved into an emerging consensus. And the consensus is as follows, and I will cease.
Now, what is very important about what he just said there is crime ain't along party lines. So those of you Black people that want to sit there and say which party is for you, no. Both parties, in fact, were against you. Shout out to Omni for the super predator reference. This is when people of color in urban communities were labeled as super predators. But y'all got it.
When I finish this statement, the consensus is A, we must take back the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents. It doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to.
My God, he definitely wasn't talking about the white kids in suburbia. Because remember the time. And this time, the only people that were being talked about in this modality of background and socioeconomic equality were people of color. This is 1993.
Ask what made them do this. They must be taken off the street. That's number one. There's a consensus on that. the Democratic chairman of the Judiciary Committee, the Democratic president of the United States of America, the Democratic attorney general, the Republican leader of this effort, Senator Hatch, the Republican senator from Texas. We all agree on that. Now, we can find some fringe folks in the study groups on the right wing and left wing, libertarians and left-wingers in my party who say, no, that's not what we should do. But politically, that consensus has been arrived at. I acknowledge there was not that consensus in the 60s. There is today.
Also understand that when Bill Clinton was still a governor in the state of Arkansas, this is during the time of gang banging in Little Rock, which premiered on HBO in 1994. Because prior to that, in 92, 93, 91, and 90, they were filming the crimes, the gang-related crimes in urbanized youth in Little Rock. And guess what? They wasn't white. Because for some odd reason, people think that Arkansas only houses white people and there are no people of color in Arkansas. And let me be the first to tell you, there are plenty of people of color in Arkansas. But they're relegated to really, really ridiculous urban areas. Shout out to College Station, which has faced severe economic devastation more than once due to tornadoes, and nobody has been ever bothered to repair that. Shout out to North Little Rock. Shout out to West Little Rock. Just because y'all know about the downtown central area, it don't mean that there ain't people of color here. Let's continue. Shout out to Hot Springs. Shout out to Benton. Like, y'all, man.
There's a second thing that we all have agreed upon, and that is unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision, without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now, not out of a liberal instinct for love, brother, and humanity, although I think that's a good instinct.
They've been born out of wedlock. They don't have a conscience. They haven't been socialized. This is how they on the Hill look at people of color. But y'all worried about party lines. Y'all so smart, you stupid.
But for simple, pragmatic reasons. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created.
Predators. Biden said the criminal element in urban communities will become predators in 15 years. Why, that would be 2008. Continuing. We have predators on our streets right now in 1993. Yeah, right. This bill wasn't about people of color at all.
Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society. And the truth is, we don't very well know how to rehabilitate them at that point. That's the sad truth.
The truth is, due to the 13th Amendment of the American Constitution, the United States Constitution, if you're incarcerated, you are now a slave to the United States government legally. That's the truth. So we're talking about a bill that increased slave trade legally within the United States of America. But a lot of people don't know the way the 1994 crime bill works, and we're going to get all up into it. We're going to be like a proctologist today. I'm going to put my gloves on, and we're going to put two fingers in and stir them around so that y'all can understand and stop talking to me. Don't talk to me unless you have education behind you.
You're looking at the fellow who was one of the primary architects of the Sentencing Commission.
No.
You know what the basic premise of the Sentencing Commission is? I know the presiding officer knows. It was the first time in 80 years we rejected the notion that the condition of sentencing must be related to how long it would take to rehabilitate. I'm the guy that said rehabilitation, when it occurs, we don't understand it, notice it. And even when we notice it and we know it occurs, we don't know why. So you cannot make rehabilitation a condition for release. That's why in our system, there's the federal system, you serve 85% of your time. I remember when it was going on, when I was making these arguments in the late 70s, they used to call it Biden's same time for the same crime provision. It's a shame, but we don't know how to rehabilitate. But there is a consensus, and I will cease. A, we must make the streets safer. I don't care why someone is a malfactor in society. I don't care why someone is antisocial. I don't care why they become.
Meanwhile, while he's telling you he doesn't believe in rehabilitation, in the 1994 crime bill, in the literature of it, it speaks to promoting reduced recidivism, which is rehabilitation. So he's telling you he wrote this bill with language that is in direct opposition to his positioning. He posits on, no, there is no rehabilitation, which is why we get into other idiosyncrasies of the 1994 crime bill.
Become a sociopath. We have an obligation to cordon them off from the rest of society, try to help them, try to change the behavior. That's why we do in this bill. We have drug treatment and we have other treatments to try to deal with it. But they are in jail, away from my mother, your husband, our families. But we would be absolutely stupid as a society if we didn't recognize the condition that nurtured those folks still exist.
The condition that nurtured those folks still exists. And what was his plan with this crime bill? Mandatory life imprisonment for persons convicted of certain felonies. Section 7002 limits the authority of a court to modify an imposed term of imprisonment to include a requirement that the defendant be at least age 70 and have served at least 30 years in prison for the offense or offenses for which the defendant is currently imprisoned, and that a determination has been made by the director of the Bureau of Prisons and that the defendant is not a danger to the safety of any other person in the community. Shout out to the 1994 crime bill. Life. For crack, cocaine, not for powder. And white people wasn't really doing crack like that back in the 90s. They was doing a lot of powder, though. Yeah. Go ask one of the dope boys that you know. One of them old heads. They'll tell you white people wasn't buying rocks. They was buying powder by the boatload. And they were not being penalized at all.
And we must deal with that. And I think there's a consensus among Republicans in that. Old barbed wire Republican conservatives want to hang them high. Even those folks are saying, hey, we got to deal with the root cause of this. Not one or the other, but separately. And liberal Democrats who used to say, let's look at the sociological underpinnings of why this occurred, and we have to, they're now saying, hey, look, we got to take back the streets. We'll make that fight later. So there is a consensus. I hope the remainder of the discussion as we close out the debate in this bill, we can end that old fight. We can put it behind us. Hopefully we have, the senator from West Virginia said this is a historic moment on this bill, a consensus being reached. I think it is, but I think it's a historic moment for a political reason as well. Hopefully, we will end the discussion about whether or not Republicans are Neanderthal and only want to hang them high, and Democrats are wacko liberals and only want to look at the causes. Those days are gone. Evidence of that, the Democratic senator from Delaware and the Republican conservative senator from Utah are united in a Biden-Hatch crime bill that does all the things that I just said. So as one of my relatives who remain nameless would say, God willing and the creek not rising, hopefully we'll end this kind of debate and decide how we're going to deal with the problem from here on. I reserve the balance of my time.
Senator reserves the balance of his time.
Now, I just wanted you to first hear the language and understand the history. Now, to take you further down through there. So I'm not playing with y'all. Y'all really be getting on my nerve. All this talking y'all be doing, talking loud, not saying much. I know we want to start. I zoomed it in and then I lost my place where I wanted to start. And this is from brookings.edu. So you can look it up yourself. It's from Brookings. Okay. So we're going to go on ahead and start in the middle. Let's begin with the facts. Between the end of the 1960s to the beginning of the 1990s, the overall rate of violent crime more than doubled before peaking in 1991 and beginning a long-term decline that brought the rate back down to the levels of the early 1970s. The homicide rate followed a similar pattern with less variation between peaks and troughs. Between 1980 and 2006, the incarceration rate more than quadrupled before beginning a long-term decline that has brought it down to roughly where it stood when the 1994 crime bill was enacted. Since 2006, incarceration rates have fallen by 17% for white Americans, 26% for Hispanics, and 34% for African Americans. Now, remind you, that would mean that incarceration rates for African Americans were way, way, way high. They were all the way up. If you look at my last FBI video, you will see over 500,000 Black people were incarcerated after the 1994 crime bill to 2006. These are facts. It's not emotion. It's not fiction. These are statistics that cannot be denied. Did the 1994 crime bill help decrease the rate of violent crime? Probably, although the rate had begun to decline before the bill went into effect. Did the bill contribute to the expansion of incarceration? Again, probably so. Although the bulk of the growth occurred in the 15 years before the bill was enacted and had fallen significantly for nearly 15 years. But one thing is clear, the 1994 bill interacted with and reinforced an existing and a highly problematic piece of legislation, the Anti-Drug Abuse Act of 1986. See how that works, ladies and gentlemen? See, the way legislation works, one law piggybacks off of another law, and the secondary law, depending on how it's written, can have catastrophic effects on marginalized communities. And that created huge disparities in sentencing between crack and powder cocaine. Under this bill, a person was sentenced to a 5-year minimum sentence for 5 grams of crack cocaine, but it took 500 grams of powder cocaine to trigger the same sentence. Because crack is a cheaper alternative to powder cocaine. It is more prominent in low-income neighborhoods. These neighborhoods are more likely to be predominantly Black and in urban areas that can be over-policed more easily than suburban or rural areas. While the Fair Sentencing Act of 2010, enacted under the Obama-Biden administration, reduced the crack powder cocaine disparity from 100 to 1 to 18 to 1, the damage had already been done and the effects continue to this day. Damn, like I might know what I'm talking about. In the absence of the 1986 anti-drug bill, the effects of the 1994 on extended incarceration rates would have been less severe. That duality, that piggybacking. But as James Clyburn's comments show, getting tough on drugs was the key objective of the 1994 bill, not an unintended byproduct. Let's return to the unprotected or underprotected comment from Professor Kennedy. Members of the CBC claim they want better policing for Black communities rather than more. This is complicated for people to interpret, especially when polls show that over 80% of Blacks want more police presence, not less. See, and it was Black people that didn't have a full understanding of what the hell they was doing at them polls because they didn't understand the politics of it. That put the knot in the noose on the community's neck. See, those were self-hating coons. And I said it. Often surveys don't ask the right type of questions about policing. Questions that would get a complexity and nuance. Here's what we mean. Police respond more slowly to calls for service in Black communities. Ambulance services responding in Black communities compared to white communities are several minutes slower. If someone's suffering from a stroke or a heart attack, these minutes are often a matter of life and death. In addition, the violent crime clearance rate is unacceptably low. To most Black people, it seems that police care less for their communities, for their deceased loved ones, and for their own lives. So when Black people say more policing, they mean better than what they have and similar to what predominantly white communities receive. So Black people thinking that they were helping themselves and helping their communities because they didn't understand the politics caused a real big issue. But don't worry, it gets worse. Violent crime rates worsened in the years that followed, increasing more than 15% between 1986 and 1994. Even more sweeping in its scope than the federal funding bills that preceded it. President Clinton then signed the 1994 crime bill, which remains the most extensive federal crime legislation ever passed, which remains, meaning to this day, meaning still on the books, meaning it has not been removed. But you know, Biden apologized, so my bad. It authorized the death penalty for dozens of existing and new federal crimes. And it mandated life imprisonment for a third violent felony, also known as the 3 strikes and you're out rule. It also banned 19 types of semi-automatic assault weapons, and it created the Violence Against Women Act, which was designed to protect victims of domestic violence. For the previous decade, Americans had usually identified crime as the biggest problem facing the country. Although it was not known at the time, violent crime had reached its peak in 1991. Again, I told you, gangbanging the Little Rock. You know what I'm saying? 3 years earlier, crack cocaine, which had appeared in the mid-'80s, was still ravaging large swaths of urban America and was blamed for gang violence and the crime epidemic facing the nation, which is why there's disparities in sentencing for crack cocaine versus powder. The climate of fear was summed up by Clinton, who in signing the bill said gangs and drugs have taken over our streets and undermined our schools. He ain't talk about redlining, though. He ain't talk about the limited property taxes to fund the school system actually causes a disparity in undereducation in urban communities, but whatever. Child. But in retrospect, among the most significant and long-lasting impacts of the legislation was the authorization of incentive grants to build or expand correctional facilities through the Violent Offender Incarceration and Truth in Sentencing Incentive Grants Program. This provided $12.5 billion in grants to fund incarceration. What? $12.5 billion to incarcerate urban communities. With nearly 50% earmarked for states that adopted tough, truth in sentencing laws that scaled back parole. Under this grant program, eligible states receive money to expand their prison capacity and incarcerate people convicted of violent crimes. The number of state and federal adult correction facilities rose 43% from 1990 to 2005. For a period in the 90s, a new prison opened up every 15 days on average. The prison buildup can be traced back to 1972. Jesus Christ. But y'all right. Y'all right. It's just about black people hating themselves, right? Huh? I'm just saying real quick. Y'all really don't even get it. Like, y'all just don't even get it. First, the 1994 crime bill gave the federal stamp of approval for states to pass even more tough on crime laws. And by 1994, all states had passed at least one mandatory minimum law. But the 1994 crime bill encouraged even more punitive laws and harsher practices on the ground, including by prosecutors and police to lock up more period and for longer periods of time. Second, the 1994 law shaped Democratic Party politics for years to come. Let me say that again for the slow people in the back. The 1994 law shaped Democratic Party politics for years to come. The 1994 crime bill was a key part of the Democratic strategy to show that it can be tougher on crime than Republicans. Now you do the math. 94, 2004, 2014, 2024, you are talking about a good 30 years plus that this bill has shaped how the Democrats interact with urbanized communities. But you got people that will tell you today, oh no, the Democrats love people of color. They do everything for people of color. When they want to be tougher on crime than the Republicans. Huh? While Republicans continued their Willie Horton-style fear-mongering that pushed for more punitive policies in the states, the official 1996 Democratic Party platform, which was meant to provide a vision for the Democratic Party nationwide, relied heavily on the 1994 law to display their tough-on-crime credentials. An entire section in the platform is dedicated to tough punishment, taking pride in the fact that the Democratic Party passed tougher sentencing laws and provided more federal funding for prisons in the states. The platform encouraged states to pass truth in sentencing laws, bragged about instituting the death penalty for nearly 60 more crimes, and even encouraged the prosecution of young people as adults. Shout out to the Democrats. All them young black boys that was doing crimes before this bill and just getting charged as kids and, allowed to be, free of their youthful indiscretion because of the 1994 crime bill. Now they're adults with records. You ever seen somebody that has a felony try to get a job? Hell, have you ever tried to get a job, even a basic job at a call center? You know they do background checks, yeah? So you know that convictions actually increase economic disparity. Let me break that down for those that, you know, I don't want to be talking over people's heads. If you're arrested, it's really hard for you to get a job. It's really hard for you to get a job paying more than minimum wage, which means you'll stay in poverty and reliant upon social services in order to survive. In 2019 and beyond, the best course of action for politicians who want to promote a smart, justice-oriented vision for America is to disavow the 1994 crime bill and instead support a 50% cut in incarceration rates on the federal and state levels. Those running for federal office should pledge to use their powers to close prisons once in office. This would be the best way to counteract the effects of the 1994 crime bill and prove that you don't believe in the discredited tough on crime policies of the past. And this, beloveds, is from the ACLU. Huh? The National Political and Advocacy Department. Now let's look at 3 ways the crime bill continues to hurt people of color. It authorized death penalty for the 60 new federal offenses. 74% percentage of defendants recommended for the death penalty by federal prosecutors who were people of color. This is a new form of eugenics. Get into it. Imposed mandatory life sentences for individuals with 3 or more felony convictions. 78.5% of Americans who served life sentences or who were serving life sentences in 2016 were people of color. Right. So those that they didn't delete, they kept your asses in jail forever, which is a direct correlation to the lack of leadership in the African American community, because men of color are locked up for life from the 1994 crime bill. But you want to sit there and tell me that I hate me as a Black person, but you don't even know the after effects of the 1994 crime bill. Will you please go drink a big ass cup of bleach? 3, levied harsh new penalties for justice involved youth. 2/3 is the share of youth sentenced to life in prison in America who are Black. But you're right, though. See, this is why I can't have conversations with certain people in these spaces, because there is a difference between people of color and niggas. And niggas are loud and loquacious and have a bit more clue of what the fuck is really happening in the society in which they live. You have these people that lack any knowledge of politics consistently talking about political parties and who is racist and who is not. News flash, dum-dum. The Democratic Party fucked you. Vote life. So when we're talking about prison culture, yes, the Democratic Party made prison culture Black culture. And when we're talking about all the after effects of what that prison culture has amalgamated to in our community, in our society, yeah, it's all Black culture. And if that's a gaslight for you, then you're an idiot to me. Stop talking to me. That being said, bye. I just had to come and give y'all that little bit of education, because I'm tired of idiots talking on social media. I'm tired of idiots talking on social media. You want to know why Black women don't submit to Black men? They can't afford to. Because the way the laws are set up, Black men can go to jail for sneezing on the corner and be in jail for the rest of their life. You want to know why there's a fatherless America? It's because most of the fathers are incarcerated for the rest of their life. You want to know why there's so many young mothers? Because when these men get out of jail and they don't have anything else to rely on, they rely on pimp culture, which became a super big, huge thing in the 70s and the early 80s due to the blaxploitation era. Please understand the history of these United States of America, especially when it comes to Black people, before you ever say anything to me. Most of y'all wouldn't know what it is to be a political activist or a social activist if it came up and smacked you in the face. Meanwhile, me, she, her. I have been a social activist since I'm 3 years old. To this day, everything I do is for the culture, for the children, and for my people. So if me not talking to you soft makes you feel a type of way, it makes you feel gaslit good, your mama should be talking to you the same way that I am. Your father should be talking to you the same way that I am. It is not my fault that you come from piss poor stock. Your family members must be one of the 2/3 or the 78.5% that's incarcerated for the rest of their life. Take care.